And as a refresher for all of you and maybe new information for some of our new members, I just wanted to give you a brief background on the Education Collaborative. It is a group consisting of the VSBA, the Vermont Superintendents Association, the Vermont Principals Association, the Vermont Council of Special Education Administrators, the Vermont Association of School Business Officials, and VSBA. And the services provided by the collaborative have to do with monitoring of legislative bills and keeping track of what's happening in committees, and also publication of the Education Legislative Report, which all of you received by email, and it's an extensive report on education bills that are under consideration. The collaborative itself does not take positions on bills. Individual member associations such as the VSBA take their own positions on bills. The collaborative's purpose really is more to provide information to its members.
Thank you. And to share the costs of the legislative analyst. So Jennifer is technically an employee of the VSBA. It reports to Sue, but it is a resource that is shared by the members of the collaborative, led by Sue. So we're fortunate to have you both on board.
Thank you.
Do you have anything you want to?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, I'm a parent. I have a child in high school, one who graduated last year, so I know some of what's going on. And I'm in East Montpelier, so we're having issues. So.
Spend some time in the VSBA webinar archive this afternoon.
Yes, I did.
Familiarizing yourself with some issues. So before Representative Webb gets here, so the House committees today were announced. The Senate committees have not yet been officially named and announced, which is one reason why they declined to join us. Although I do know that Senator Ruth will continue on as chair. Before Representative Webb gets here, I just wanted to provide you all with if you weren't able to attend the webinar or didn't register for the webinar last week, I'm not going to go through the whole thing by any stretch, but I did want to go through a couple slides, and I did share this with Kate Webb, so she has this. Some of the issues that we see on the horizon. We talked a little bit last month about the December 1 tax commissioner letter. At the time, I focused more on the fact that $6.6 million of new revenue was being recommended to be diverted to early care and education. I missed, because I did not closely review the Education Fund Outlook, which you now have a copy of. It was out on the table. In order to keep the level average homestead tax rate and non-residential rates level, they're relying on $21 million of one-time money for the third year in a row. So even though we've seen growth in the grant list, growth in revenue to the Ed Fund because the sales tax performed well, irrespective of the e-commerce, new revenue coming in from e-commerce. It still takes $21 million in one-time funds in order to keep those tax rates level, which starts to make more sense when you think about ed spending is predicted to go up at 3.24%, and ed spending per pupil was predicted to go up over 4%. The notion that you could have that level of spending growth and keep tax rates flat because of grand list growth alone is challenging. So in any event, I think we're going to need to, we've been forecasting sort of doom and gloom because of all the use of one-time money. And the doom has not come to pass because the economy is performing well and revenue is exceeding projections. But at some point, that may not be true. And so we're going to continue to, I believe, reinforce the point around.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk.
If voters are approving budgets that have increases in them, there should be a connection between the budgets that they approve and the tax bills they receive. So that's that. Any questions about that, or? Yes.
I would assume, that figure is up for debate, no?
Correct, this is the consensus forecast, so there's a bit of negotiation that goes on between the joint fiscal office and the tax department. The joint fiscal office produces the ed fund outlook. And so, but the administration, tells them what they want the policy to be, and if the policy is, we want level tax rates, the joint fiscal office says, well, then you need to, this is how the numbers need to add up in order to get there. And you'll know, so that is.
I have a question, this is Lori Childers.
Yeah.
Did you say that the education fund outlook paper was there? Is that somewhere else we can get it for those of us who are here?
Yes, so I don't know that we emailed them. Sue, can you just forward that
can
to
do it
me
now.
right now? Carrie's we had sent Carrie a link to that, so she will email it to you right now. And just so folks, I'm so sorry, folks on the phone, we're looking at slides 12 and 13 in the slides that Carrie sent you earlier. Based on what we're hearing from legislators and other organizations or state agencies, these are the issues that we believe will be topics of discussion this session, in addition to funding and governance, which are perennial issues. But we expect renewed interest in capital construction aid. There's been no state aid for capital construction since 2007. And our facilities are showing that. There is a substantial push for mandatory lead testing of every tap in every school. They did a pilot program this year that elevated levels of lead in a few taps. And so the Senate in particular is taking the lead on legislation, and state agencies frankly are preparing to act as though it's already a requirement. So we're have a phone call with them next week to remind them that before they tell school districts they have to do something, they have to have authority. So they need to wait until the legislative session plays itself out, because, to the extent there are additional resources in the education fund, potentially environmental mitigation is a use of those funds. It's a one-time expense, it's an appropriate use rather than to hold tax rates level. Kate reminded me, Representative Webb reminded me that radon testing is also an issue that's probably likely to come back this year. The ethnic studies bill that was part of the miscellaneous ed bill last year is the only education-related bill that's been introduced so far. Bitsy Johnson, speaker, re-elected today, mentioned it in her speech. So I expect that will be one of the early bills to move, at least on the House side. And that's a bill really creating a task force to review the standards that were, Common Core state standards, the science standards, et cetera, that are adopted by the state board, and provide recommendations to ensure that they, the curriculum and the standards reflect the need to tell stories of other, cultures and that aren't the dominant culture. And it also requires that group to review statutes and district policies to see whether any changes need to be made in order to make them more, I can't remember the exact language, but in order to address gaps in the policy that, that don't address some of the concerns that have been raised through this bill. So we worked last year with the bill sponsor to try to get it to a place where we felt like it would work. However, it does key off of the state agency having resources to actually support that kind of work and analysis. The staff student ratios task force will come out with a report, but no recommendations, so I'm not sure what legs that topic will have, but anytime a committee receives a report, they'll tend to take some testimony on it. Act 46 and Act 166, there's already been legislators and or In the case of 166, Secretary French has declared that's an issue that he thinks needs attention this session. As a reminder, 166 is universal pre-K law. Act 46 needs no introduction. Pension funding, again, this is just a topic, but there's been no actual proposal to do anything about pensions, other than a shared acknowledgement that it is a liability, that it poses a substantial problem for the state. Moody's downgraded the state's AAA bond rating in response to the, in part to the pension issue. So I expect it will receive some attention. Historically, some of the discussion has been around shifting that cost to local school district budgets. They've started to do that 2 years ago. So again, that's the sort of dynamic that we find ourselves in, and saying, you created the benefit, it is unacceptable to shift the obligation to pay for it onto school districts who play no role whatsoever in determining what the benefit looks like. And then finally, Act 173, implementation. It's a very significant piece of legislation that, while it has a 5-year implementation time horizon, the next year we're going to start to see changes in terms of the amount of money that's available to school districts. And currently 50% of the positions in the Agency of Education and the Special Education Department are vacant. So the assistance available through the agency to support implementation has been lacking. And I'll talk to you later tonight about what we're doing about that. But a message that we're going to carry with our partners is that committees really need to spend some time paying attention to how this first year of implementation has gone and is going. Any questions about any of that? We also get into our resolutions. So for those of you on the phone, we're on page 16 and 17. So these are our new resolutions, just as a refresher for folks. Don't apply cost containment to budgets that have already been approved by voters or the board. That's been that's not a new position for us, but it's newly solidified in resolution. And if you're going to move forward with a ratio conversation, then we ought to be very careful about how we're accounting for social services costs that and positions that have been added by schools in order to address the human service needs of students. And supervisory union board structure, you'll be happy to know, Gio, that's been taken care of by the Agency of Education's draft modifications to Title 16. So we met with them, and it's part of their package of changes. So we're gonna just work with the agency on their technical changes to Title 16 to make sure they're,
So this is going the miscellaneous ed bill,
yeah, or the technical, yeah.
and they're all over it.
Could you
Well,
explain that
yeah,
just a little bit?
So, this is the resolution about, the statute that requires three persons per operating district. I believe we talked last month about, the fact that the agency was also at the same time engaged in a review of the provisions of Title 16 that need to be changed to reflect the new reality, which is we have far more unified union school districts than union school districts at this point, and yet the statutes on unified union districts there's like 3 sections, and the statutes on union school districts do not neatly apply to the unified union district context. So Donna at the agency did a lot of work to correct things like elections and really technical changes, but where we've been sort of doing gymnastics to make the current statutes work in the new context. as part of that process, I suggested she also look at the statutes related to supervisory union structure, because I believe that's also a place where, given now, it used to be a bunch of little town districts formed a supervisory union, now you have multi-town districts, for multi-town school district within a supervisory union with maybe one or two other town districts. And so that the statutes ought to reflect a process for review by the state board if there appear to be. So I don't have the exact language, I'm happy to share it with you, but Sue and I reviewed it and felt like it adequately responded to our resolution. And so rather than us going into the committee by ourselves and asking for this change, we're pleased that folks at the agency saw that as another gap, and have that in their language, in their package. This was the only area, or probably the hottest topic of discussion at our webinar.
Yes.
Most number of questions and people really understanding that it was a problem.
So it wasn't kickback against this? It
No,
was like,
no,
this
it's
is an
like, tell me
issue.
more about what this is gonna look like, and yes, this is, yeah. And I had some follow-up email.
I think some of the kickback that I took it, that I know where it came from, is because they had gone to the supervisory union, couldn't get permission to go to the state board
Right,
for various reasons. Is where they were, well, who's gonna be in charge of this, and can we get this changed? We'll see what they come up with.
so, and then the rest of the slides are really long-standing resolutions that I don't need to spend a lot of time, on now. Does anybody have any questions before Representative Webb gets here? I met with her for an hour earlier this week to talk about this meeting and the board and answer her questions, and then we obviously got off talking about a number of issues, but the way I framed it to her was an opportunity to get to know this board, build a relationship. She's just coming in today as chair of this committee. It's great that she's making her way over here, hopefully. We're not gonna dig deep into some of the policy issues, because she quite frankly can't speak for her committee right now. They haven't even met yet. But it's a good opportunity for her to hear from you all about some of these issues or other issues that you're thinking about, and really just to be able to connect when I'm sitting in the table or when Clarence is sitting at the table representing the organization, that it's this larger group that's really providing the direction.
What's her,
Nicole?
Yes?
Hi, Jim Salzgiver. Just curious, when you say something's on the Agency of Education list to deal with, is that their list that they're going to present to the legislature to take action on, or how's that work?
Yes, I believe that so every year the Education Committee looks to the Agency of Education for changes to statute that they have identified, and those changes typically get incorporated into the miscellaneous ed bill. And so what Donna has been working on would be included in the slate of changes that the agency would be recommending. I know they're also recommending some changes to Act 173 that they've identified as they've started to work through. So yes, it still needs to go through the legislature. Any other questions? Okay, maybe we can talk about tobacco.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been asked to take a position.
Yes. So the VSBA has been asked to take a position. The Coalition for Tobacco-Free Vermont is going to be introducing or asking for legislation to raise the minimum legal age of sale of tobacco products from 18 to 21. And you have a 2-page memo from them about the reasons for it. But it would include the sale of cigarettes, other tobacco products, and also electronic cigarettes, such as the Juul, which is becoming a very big
We
them
can't
to
turn it up.
mute.
I'm sorry, there's some background noise for folks on the phone. We wonder if it's possible for you to mute yourselves so we don't hear the background noise.
Unless you wanna talk.
If you wanna talk, you can unmute yourself, but if you're not talking,
Wow.
great,
That
thank
sounds
you.
better, thank you. Oh, okay. So, the problem of the use of jewels among the youth in Vermont has just, happened very quickly and skyrocketed, and this is one of the ways that, they're approaching the issue. Are there any, they want our association to actually take a position on
In
this,
support,
in support of
correct.
it, yes.
And I believe they've asked the superintendents, principals, and school boards association to
Yes.
support this. And I believe the superintendent's association board of trustees has endorsed this. We don't have to apologize for not including that piece in your packet, but anybody have any questions or comments?
Well, the board have any questions? Diane,
Comments, not questions. Is that okay?
comment?
Yes, comment. I strongly believe that the VSBA should endorse this move. It is in the best interest of the health of our students and safety of our schools that we do make the age for all those tobacco products, nicotine, entering vape shops, to make it 21, make it consistent with our laws around cannabis. So as a school nurse who is actively on the front lines with this issue and has been working seriously with the Vermont Department of Health to help create educational materials and served on panels and is willing to testify, I do think that our schools are being, are having distractions, are having issues around discipline, and are a place where kids are becoming addicted to something that we also have no resources on how to get them off of this addiction to nicotine. So I'm happy to answer any questions from the front lines, but I do think that it would be worth signing on to this legislation.
Anyone else have any comments?
Just a question, are there other states that have?
Oh, sorry, Massachusetts is now 21. We have 6, going on 7 states, plenty of other jurisdictions, I think Hawaii, California, but Massachusetts has already passed it. There are counties in New York that have already passed it. They have a county sort of system around that, so it's a little bit patchwork there. I don't know what New Hampshire's status is, but we do have Massachusetts already at 21. We need to join it.
Anyone else?
It's Jim Salzgiver, just curious whether the VSA or VPA or anybody else is coming to a position on that?
I believe the VSA is supporting, and I don't know that the VPA has taken it up yet.
What?
Table this and-
Yeah.
Take it up.
Because this is a little,
Yeah.
gonna take a while to discuss this. Let's, put this on the table until after we, take care of our, dealing with our guests. Yeah, maybe that's a better way of putting it. Nevertheless, we have as a guest tonight, the chair of the House Education Committee that was, my understanding, appointed today. So can't dig too deep into it. What I'd like to do is, we'll start by going around the room. Everybody tells what part of the state they're from, and introduce yourself, and we'll
And we have a lot of people on the phone tonight, unfortunately.
When he gets to me, I'll just list them.
So Carrie will just read off your name when you can introduce yourself, for those of you on the phone.
Okay. Why don't we start with the phone?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Amy McMullen, are you on the phone? Amy McMullen, are you on the phone? Celeste? Celeste, are you on the phone?
They're all on the phone, we just asked.
Yes, I am. Getting off mute takes time.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Celeste Jarrell. I live in Sutton. I'm from the Northeast Kingdom, and I am on the Kingdom East Unified Supervisory District Board.
Thank you. Dan MacArthur, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Dan MacArthur, I'm on the Marlboro, Vermont School Board, and I'm the regional representative from the Wyndham region to the VSBA board.
Jim Salzgiver, are you on the phone? You just said something.
No, he is.
Jim?
Yes, I am.
Okay, can you introduce yourself?
Jim Salzgiver from Dorset on the Bennington Rutland Supervisory Union Board and the Taconic and Green Regional School District Board.
Thank you. Christina Naylor, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Christina Naylor from Dummerston School Board and representing Wyndham County.
Okay, Lori Childers, are you on the phone?
I am. I'm Lori Childers. I live in Addison, and I represent Addison on the Addison Northwest School District, which is a pretty new school district, and Addison County rep to the VSBA.
Thank you. Linda Smith?
I am here. Hey, welcome. Well, Tiff Webb. My name is Linda Smith. I represent Rutland County. Took over when Clarence became the head of the board, and I'm part of the Corey Valley District, Unified Union District, and part of the Greater Rutland County SU.
Thank you. Sarah McLean,
Thank
are
you.
Sarah McLean, are you there?
I'm here, yes. Sarah McLean, I live in Lincoln, and I'm on the Mount Abraham Unified School District Board and representing Addison County, VSBA.
Okay, I'm going to try Amy again. Amy McMullen? And Susan Holson. Susan,
Hi, I'm Susan Holson. I'm the VSBA Director of Education Services, and Kate, I'm also one of your constituents.
Good to know.
That's all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead and start. Keep right on going.
Okay. I'm Carrie Lamb. I'm the Director of Operations here at VSBA.
And I'm Gaston Bathalon from Troy, so I'm on the Troy School Board and also the North Country Supervisory Union representing Orleans and Northern Essex.
Gio Honeyford, I'm on the soon-to-be non-existent Royalton School Board. And happy to say that.
I'm Kim Gleason from Essex and on the Essex Westford School Board and treasurer here.
I am Diane Kersen-Glitman. I'm from Jericho. I'm on the Chittenden East Supervisory Union School Board, the Mount Mansfield Modified Unified School District. And we have Huntington in our group.
I know Huntington.
And I'm Mark Nielsen in Wild North. I'm from Johnson.
Lucas Barrett. I'm from Bradford, Vermont. I'm on the Bradford Elementary School Board and the Orange East Supervisory.
I'm Floria Smith. I'm in the East Montpelier Elementary School Board and in the newly forced merger, maybe still in lawsuit. And I represent Orange. With Lucas, we represent Orange in Washington.
I'm Neil Odell. I'm on the Norwich School Board and then also serve on the Dresden Interstate District School Board with Hanover, New Hampshire.
I'm Lou Bushy. I serve on the newly formed Caledonia Cooperative School District Board, but also the Caledonia Central Supervisory Union Board, and represent Caledonia. Well, I used to represent portions of Essex County, but none of those schools exist anymore. They're all in the northern part. So essentially Caledonia County with Celeste Garrell is on.
Clarence Haynes, I'm chairman of the Wells Springs Unified Union District and vice chair of the Rutland County Supervisory Union District and president of the VSBA.
You know me.
I do love you.
Good to see you, and congratulations on your appointment.
I call it congratulations.
That's right. I'll just put it over there.
Sue Siglowski, Director of Legal and Policy Services for the VSBA.
Jennifer Michael, Legislative Analyst for the Vermont Education Collaborative.
Don Collins, I serve on the Swan Elementary School Board, and this is for the Union High School Board. And I'm going to tell you, starting tomorrow, you're going to have more friends than you could have.
I'm finding some.
Thank you, everyone. Just to get started here, that VSBA is a membership organization, and we work off resolutions that are approved, and if there's anything that gets debated or changed, this board does, we'll come to you, we'll testify, policies and that, but be well aware that there will be some memberships and some boards that disagree with the position we're taking. We can't always be for 100% of everything. So you will hear from some boards directly that have a different opinion than what we might have. We understand that, and we do the best we can to serve all the volunteer boards in Vermont.
So you're telling me that all of the school boards of the state are not on the same page?
I could think of 2 or 3 things right off that might put us in, we won't dwell on the negative at this point, but we try to be very collaborative, but there are some things that come down to votes here, and not everybody is going to be pleased, but we're still going to do the best job we can for the students of the state. Give you a chance now if you'd like to tell us who's on the committee with you, so we know what's going on, and any statement you'd like to make, and then we can, some people have some questions, I'm sure.
So sorry I didn't bring my names. I could probably list them. I think I might. You got them.
I was listening.
Some of them are brand new to me. Larry Coopely is the vice chair, and he's been on the committee, I think, for 6 years. And Peter Conlon, who is school board in, God, my name is district, but it's Addison something, yeah. He is the ranking member. And then we have returning Dylan Giambattista from Essex, and we have Chris Matos returning from Milton, and everybody else is new to the committee. Sarita Austin, who is a school board member from Williston, and a guidance, I think she's guidance counselor, or maybe it's Colchester, I'm not sure where. Lynn Batchelor from Derby, she was on the House Institutions Committee. I was hoping we could tap into her a little bit related to the Capitol bill. And Liam Elder Connors is another one from Starksboro. He's also been a school board member. We've got a pretty experienced committee, I have to say. Kathleen James has an education background. I'm forgetting exactly what it is. Jay Hooper didn't get out of college that long ago, so it's helpful for him. Chris Matters, I said, and Representative Tu from St. Albans is another young one. So we have a young committee, which I'm thrilled with. I am as of day one.
Right. Right. We'll
This
see.
could change. My own background is I am a retired speech language pathologist and special ed case manager. And I worked for about 20 years, I think, in the Williston School District. I also worked, I did maybe a semester in Shelburne and a semester in Charlotte and a couple of other places that I worked through the year. But primarily Burlington and what was once called the Chittenden South Supervisory Union are the places where I worked. I was the person that was often tagged to address the most complex situations, and often socially complex in terms of children and families. I was often the case manager of those kinds of situations. I'm understanding from my colleagues, having retired in 2013, that the face of the classroom has changed since 2013. In terms of the number of children that are coming to school that are suffering from trauma, toxic stress, and it's really showing up in the classroom, and it's truly a problem, and we are aware of that. My work last year, I did tremendous work on Act 173. I was the only special educator in the room, which was helpful. And happy to talk about what your interests are, what I'm seeing coming forward at the moment.
I ran them through a little bit of what I talked about. The ethnic studies bill is introduced.
That's been introduced, yeah.
Yep. I just want to say, thrilled to have you as a partner in this role. You were a tremendous advocate for public schools over the last 2 years as ranking member of the House Education Committee, and definitely have contributed your expertise, I think, to the betterment of public education. So we're really looking forward to working with you. I want to now turn it over to any board members that have some thoughts or questions for a representative, recognizing it's day one in the committee.
I've got 6 hours on the
So
You know more now than you'll ever know.
what's happened this year is the session started a little later and our meeting is earlier, so it's very rare that the first day of the session is also our. So very happy that you came on.
Gio, you want to go?
Yeah, so I'll go right into one of those controversial ones that we don't all agree on.
Let me guess.
So I've been on this board for quite a few years, and the predecessor of Act 46, 883, I think it was, and it's always been the position of this board to stay engaged in the process, so we can help the legislature craft the best legislation that we can get in the best interest of the kids. Since Act 46 has passed, the board has taken a position of that now that it's passed and it's law and boards are complying with the law, we're not interested in major changes to it. And so I guess what do you think is going to happen in terms of 46 legislation? Do you think there's going to be major changes in it? What's your personal perspective on that? Because personally, my district complied with it. We unified with the neighboring district. It was not an easy process. And if they made major changes to Act 46, it's going to undercut all the work that we've done.
I can't speak to this. I'm also from a district that was just, as soon as the incentives came in, it was very quick. I describe it as, I'm from a district that was, spent 50 years trying to merge. So we had a long history, and when finally the incentives were there, Charlotte came on board and we were ready to go. So in my district, it was very easy. In terms, I voted for Act 46, I voted for Act 49, I support the law, personally. I support it staying what it is. In terms of what we will do this year, I'm still tracking down, I have a couple of things I have to keep track of. One is the rules of the House, and the other is our statutes. The rules of the House make it such that I'm trying to remember which is which. We can't pass no acts related to the merger, to anything that's in pending litigation. Let me put it this way. The policy of the legislator is not to interfere with pending litigation. There's another thing in our rules that says, and you're not supposed to discuss or debate. So I am right now working with our clerk and with our leg counsel to find what the heck does that mean? Do you mean that I can't talk about it at all? Or are we talking about, I'm not talking about a specific merger challenge? So I hope to be able to get that clarified. With that in mind, given that, we're trying to sort out if it is wise or helpful to try to do some tweaks to help those mergers, or whether we are better off just letting the laws, pass through the courts. And I'm hoping that we can get that sorted out and figured out. I have a meeting with the speaker on Monday to get this. As soon as that gets opened up, that's when all my friends are going to appear. Yeah.
So in terms of the interests, I can tell you, of the leadership on our committee, there's not an interest. One, we can't. And two, from what I can see, we can't. And two, we don't have an interest in changing the purpose of the law. It's just looking at people that just are having a little struggle and might need a little help. And whether
This is Dan MacArthur. Can I say something?
As far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
you in charge?
So this is Dan MacArthur from Marlboro. I'm looking at the makeup of the committee, and I implore you not to forget about us in the southern part of the state. We don't see a lot of representation from our region. I feel like we're well represented in the legislature, but please don't forget about us, Representative Webb. And I guess I want to say relative to the Act 46 and the pending litigation, I have a feeling it might have as much to do with the way that the state board interpreted the law as it has to do with the law itself. So I just want to throw that out, that it may not mean that the law itself gets overruled or changed, as Gio was talking about, but just the way in which it was finally implemented. So I just want to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I will tell you that I did go to the Wyndham School. I did visit the school, and I did drive down the hill in the school bus. And we do have someone from Manchester. It's not exactly southern, but it's a little bit, it's southern to me, and not southern to you.
To change the subject completely, looking at some of the policy issues up here, it strikes me capital construction aid is one I think that we really have probably, I'm gonna bet, unanimous agreement is something that's really important. And if you think about it, it really ties into lead testing. Because if we had been able to maintain and update our facilities instead of living by the Vermont rule that you can fix everything with duct tape, we really might have been improving a lot of our, the environments that our kids are in. So that one is sort of like, apolitical. We could really, that could be a good win. We could do a lot of goodwill if we could get that capital construction aid back on track. I think a lot of schools really want to provide top-level, top-notch education, and an environment makes such a difference in the outlook of your staff, of your students. People just pull together when they're in a nicer place. So that's my plug.
Okay.
Let me respond, or you want me to?
Yeah, you can respond.
So when Nicole presented this list to me, I did check in with the chair of institutions and corrections. And one of the things that constraints we're dealing with is they don't have anybody at the agency anymore that's overseeing that. This is going to make it I know, I hear you.
I got big rolls of duct tape.
Yeah, just duct tape. We love our duct tape in Vermont.
It's not that far away.
So
Yeah,
there's
that's what I was gonna say.
there's a
She's
question
still around.
there is the question that if we were to open it up and the others are coming in and saying, hey, but we did this on our own bonds and we did this, and there wasn't oversight on the work that was done. So it's a can of worms, and yet I hear you, and I have an interest in it as well. I was wishing that we could do something to help the mergers, to rethink 21st century education, because sometimes we're putting duct tape on things that probably should just go away.
Okay. Don, I forget to come to this side of the room, so I go to catch it. So I'm over to Don, and then we'll come back here.
Okay. I think all of us around the table think these things here that have developed through our interaction with our membership are good. But I want to share with you something that I hope you will consider focusing on. Because to me, it's should be one of the top priorities. I'm going to take you back about a decade. Did you ever know Doug Racine?
I did.
Doug Racine went around to probably every county, and this is when he was in the Senate, and they looked at children in poverty and hunger and those types of things. Wonderful feedback. About that same time, Joey Donovan was chair of House Ed. And I remember going back to Montpelier, and I think I was always excited going to Montpelier. just thinking that, you know, we represent the people and hopefully we'll do it well. But I was so excited because I thought we finally recognized the problem that's driving our student behaviors, our students in special education. It just seems like to me, everything that we see in schools that needs to be addressed is because we have so many children and families in poverty. And you know what? Nothing really significant ever happened. So I'm going to ask you to add this to your list, that we really need to get to the bottom of it. It is sad, as a school board member, I see it every week. And it's gotten worse since 10 years ago, to confession. So I know you're going to be busy and I'm going to have a lot, but I hope there's some discussions with different organizations. What can we do for these children and families in poverty? I think if we could turn that one around, we'd be in great shape.
It's kind of a topic that needs to be in every committee.
It really is. Somebody needs to take it on it. And Doug did, but then he ran for governor and didn't come back. Somebody needs to. Yes.
To piggyback on what Don was saying, when you start talking about cost containment, to like, you know, please take into consideration those adverse childhood experiences that I know that you were just talking about, and that sort of plays into, you know, accounting for more social services, more human services at school. Also the summer learning loss, because, you know, if you ignore the impact of poverty, we're losing a lot in the summer, and we need that money in the budgets. And lastly, to not make any changes to the budgets as they are, that we're working on right now, that we, you know, that we want to put, for some districts it's more complicated because we're sort of divided, but for most districts, don't undermine the work of all of us school board members by trying to change something that we just did.
We're hearing about this fatigue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every year.
Teacher, I understand that.
Yes. And lastly, when you were talking about the capital construction aid, a lot of districts, like our district, part of the disparity of our two sides of East Montpelier and the others is that we passed a big bond because we wanted, you know, we believe that the built environment really affects the kids. But most districts that did that still follow all the procedures. So what you were saying about, so we still follow procedures with Kathy Kimberly, even though knowing that we wouldn't get any money. So, you know, at least it might be half, you wouldn't be looking at us trying to come back and trying to like get payback from what we did. Is really all about the best outcomes for kids, and the built environment really impacts everybody in the building. And the change that we had as a school was dramatic, you know, for kids, for staff, for, you know, everything.
When did you do that?
So we opened 2014, and it took 6 years to pass the bond and 2 years of construction. But yeah, it was, and at the end, Governor Scott came to the building, and all the posters, they, you know, they uphold a lot of different things at school because it has made a difference.
I did drive by your school.
You did? You should come visit it.
I stopped and I visited Cal School and I did drive by your school. It was fun.
Was it a Sunday?
But it really was.
And thank you for being here today, considering the weather.
I stayed out here overnight.
Kevin?
Just as we're asking not to change things, I think looking at Act 166 critically will be really important. I think its intention, of course, was well intended, but to offer only 10 hours of preschool reimbursement to families means we may be exacerbating the divide in terms of equity and access. And I think that really requires some careful analysis, because we would do better, I think, to provide adequate hours to families in need than dollars to those who will be sending their children regardless, in terms of trying to bridge our gap with student outcomes. So I hope that that is an area that we could see some change.
It's a passion of mine. I was speech language pathologist and I would also go around and visit children in child care centers and in homes. So that is a passion of mine. Act 166 was passed before I got onto the committee. It has some challenges. I know that my wonderful vice chair, Larry Cookley, wants to just get rid of the bill completely, but I've described it as what you want to do is sink a ship, but there are a whole bunch of children on it. So I'm not quite prepared to just repeal Act 166. We have 3 reports coming in. We have one from JFO. I mean, I've tried to read that. I've been able to read that.
I've read the executive summary.
Yeah, the executive summary wasn't even right. Yeah. So that we have one, I have 2 reports already, but the one I'm waiting for is the 3rd report. And that was done by an outside agency looking at 166 in particular, and looking at whether it's really meeting what the intention of the law was, and then making recommendations. That's due, we should be hearing from them. We have a report due in March, and we expect it to be finalized in June. So I think this year, in terms of 166, which I am really, really engaged to do something about, probably maybe there might be some tweaks this year, because I think there's already problems with background checks and when does it start and those kind of things that are little things that I think we can do. But anything major, I think we could wait. I am with you. I would love to see more hours. I don't know how we can do it without our private partners at this point. And yeah, 10 hours was just not sufficient. The good news is that we do have more children that are accessing pre-K than we used to, but it's not coming without its problems.
I think the challenge too is to squeeze out the access even in the number of providers available and slots available for those who.
And we don't pay them enough. And we don't have good, our subsidies aren't good enough. It's a real challenge. And when we have so many people, coming in and wanting things from the budget, we want to say, can we just find a way to pay these child care workers, get them the credentials that they need, and make it so that they can make that work, especially for that birth to 3. There is work that's coming. I don't think the only way they seem to figure out how to fund it is to get into the Ed Fund. And I've been very clear with them that I'm really game for trying to solve that problem. But the Ed Fund is pre-K-12. And I know people want to make it higher ed too. That's because it just gets voted in the budget. We don't, voted in the school board, so in local. So I am fairly protective of the Ed Fund.
Thank you.
And I'm
Kind
very clear on that.
of gets nailed.
Can I segue into the Ed Fund now?
Oh. You and everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone wants in.
No, and I'm not sure if you came here tonight expecting you get like 15 things that you're going to tell you to think about.
Not just a surprise.
Yeah, I mean, almost all of us right now are working on budgets and trying to figure things out and costs. And one of the things that frankly I missed when that December 1st tax letter came out was the administration's recommendation, suggestion, plan to use some more one-time monies yet again to try to address the increase in property tax rates, and I'm just not sure that that's a great idea.
Well, I would say I'm not sure it's a great idea. I'm sure it's not a great idea.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we had 2 veto budgets last year, and we even had the Ethan Allen Institute saying that we had it right, that we were fiscally responsible in the budget that we were passing, and what the governor was doing was not. John McClory and I don't agree on much, but when you have even that group saying it was fiscally responsible to pay down the pension debt.
Is there a way that the average voter can get that message?
Well, one thing that is good is we've got different numbers in the House. We have a significant Democratic majority. We have I think there are 95 of us, as Democrats, and I think there's 7 progressives and 5 independents, I think. But basically, there are 43 Republicans. And last year, on the vote, most of those Republicans were supporting the budget. It's just when it came to going against the governor of their party, that they just couldn't override his veto, though they agreed with our budget. So I think that there's more hope this year, provided that the Democrats don't get cocky about it.
Yes, Lance?
So one of the things that I'm really getting very antsy about is this health care for teachers and this notion of ensuring everybody is kept whole and what that could potentially do to local budgets. Just to move 1 or 2% is like, you know, the struggle, and if it's an 80-20 split, like, I'm just saying, like the rest of Vermont state employees are paying, that's going to be a tough road to hoe, and I'm not really sure how, you know, how everybody's going to be made whole given the fiscal constraints and what everybody's talking about tonight.
Not an area that I feel prepared to talk about at this point in time, but you are reminding me that I do need to go take a look at that.
Thank you.
Anyone, yes, Lou?
You mentioned you were integral in passing Act 173, which is encouraging, especially in light of the fact that you said the AOE is understaffed in some places. How do you envision the committee being involved in making sure that that's being implemented?
I spoke with the secretary about staffing. He said that he felt comfortable with the staffing that they had. We gave them funding for 3 new positions, and none of those positions have yet been hired. It is very concerning. We are anticipating hearing from the group that has worked on it all summer. You're on that?
Yes.
Yeah. We are expecting to hear something about, and Nicole could tell you more because she's on that, about the relationship with the independent schools, the large historic academies and then the smaller ones that are receiving receiving public school dollars.
So our food is here, and Representative Webb are you gonna join us for dinner? But I did wanna just, I think anybody on the phone? If there's anybody on the phone that has one more question for Representative Webb before we break for dinner?
Okay, well, thank you.
So-
And I'm happy to give up my seat if somebody wants to sit next to Representative.
Can I phone while you eat? Or do we call back in?
You can do whichever you'd like.
Whichever you prefer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just give them a time so they know
We'll
when
be
to call
starting
back.
back at 6:30. So we will get back to the tobacco conversation. But I think before we do, I also, because it could be that you want to make a few motions after I share some things with you. Wanted to share with you some work that we've been doing in anticipation of this session with our education partners at the Vermont NEA and along with the Superintendents and Principals Association. Towards the end of last session and through the summer, the executive director of the NEA and I, knowing that we needed to work together on statewide bargaining, also began talking about just sort of the dynamic that's played out over the past couple of years where our associations have effectively been pitted against each other. And I think to put it in his words, we're getting our butts kicked on some issues because we're not coming in as a united front. And so as we started to look towards the coming session, we thought it made sense to get together just to start to feel each other out in terms of what our priorities might look like and whether or not we even wanted to even entertain the notion of coming in with a shared policy platform. So, we had a couple meetings and that was nice. And then in December, we also have regular meetings with the Secretary of Education. Jeff Francis, Jay Nichols, and I meet. We try to make it a monthly meeting where it's just a check-in. And in December, the secretary shared with us that he had been asked by the governor to put together some thoughts around education policy design, that he had done that he was working with other cabinet members, and that if we asked for it, he'd be willing to share it with us. So we asked for it. And the design was to move the state to a single school district. So we spent, I think, picking our jaws up off the floor. This seemed like a very ill-timed, potentially ill-conceived idea, and that it would have the potential to do a great deal of damage to the climate around public education if it were to receive any formal treatment. And I did ask for a meeting of the executive committee where I shared that information with them. They advised me to sort of wait and see what happens, but prepare for something to happen. And so we reached out to the NEA, who had not been privy to that information, shared it with them, and the 4 organizations began working in earnest on our own agenda for public education that we believe we're going to stand behind. It's not clear at this point what we're going to do officially. Everything from a shared op-ed and press conference and white paper to we're all just say the same things in our testimony. I mean, it's really been a range, and it really depends on, we're meeting again tomorrow after the governor's inaugural speech, where I expect not that particular concept to be put on the table, but maybe some signals inviting us to think about that concept to be put on the table. My belief is that Dan shared the concept with enough people who threw a lot of cold water on it, so that I did call him yesterday. I told him we were having a meeting. I said, I need to know what this is, and if it's a serious proposal, and if it's going to be framed as such, and if the governor's going to be talking about this. I have a board meeting. And he said, it is likely to be on the agency's website at the end of the week. There's another version where it is not proposing a single school district, but treating it as an example of what a greatly simplified system could look like, and inviting others to identify opportunities to simplify our complex system. He kept calling it a wiki document, so it's an evolving piece of work that, and you'll remember, for those of you who came to our regional meetings, that's sort of the design principle that he shared, right? Like, you have a group of people come up with an idea, and then you shop it out, and it gets better by people weighing in. I don't know how this idea gets better. What?
A few states are single district. Like
Hawaii
is the
That's
only
the
one.
only one, and they have pretty bad results.
They're out in the middle of Pacific Ocean.
They're also fairly unique.
They're available.
I think New Brunswick is another example.
But like Florida only has like dozens of school districts or something like that. They don't have many.
Sure, there are plenty of examples of other states, but the question is, given all the work that's gone on in this state over the last 3 years, why are we continuing to talk about governance? Why aren't we focusing on what the needs of students are and what the needs of these new systems are, so that they can actually perform at a high functioning level and not be under constant stress? So I guess all Vermonters may be invited to contribute to the wiki. We'll see what that document looks like. But I just thought I'd share with you sort of the 5 big ideas that the associations have articulated as a public education agenda. And certainly welcome your feedback in terms of like, hold a press conference tomorrow, or, you know, maybe just feel your way through it in the next couple weeks and see what happens. So the first is ensuring universal access to pre-K for every 4-year-old, full day pre-K. And so this concept is really, you all heard from Jay Nichols last time, their association is really pushing for 4-year-olds to be served in public schools, essentially redefining kindergarten to include 4-year-olds. This document doesn't offer a full-throated endorsement of that, but says that there are issues associated with the current program. If we're going to expand public dollars to earlier care and education, school districts must play a central role in ensuring accountability and delivery for that publicly funded early education, and we believe this should include a serious exploration of whether to serve all 4-year-olds in public schools. So it's really moving beyond what we've done for 3 years, which is to point to the problems, point to the problems, point to the problems, and not have a very clear solution. This puts a clear solution to some of the concerns that we have raised on the table for much debate, I'm sure. The second one is, I don't think it's mean-spirited per se, but you know, the state really has no business entertaining the notion of running our public education system, given the performance of the Agency of Education over the past several years. And that we have said over the past several years, we have concerns about capacity. It's gone beyond concerns about capacity and moved into the agency failing to perform its essential functions and asking the education committees to perform a thorough review of agency performance and capacity to implement current laws before we start expanding the mission of the Agency of Education. One example is, I don't know how many of you have heard this from your school business officers, but the agency has still not provided business managers with the equalized pupil counts that you need in order to build your budgets. That is a failure, and it is not acceptable. I mentioned some of the concerns we have about 173 and just positions going vacant. The third is focus on implementing current initiatives, not creating new ones. So focus on seeing 46 through, supporting even implementation of Act 77, 166, and 173. We talked more about our concerns around 173. The fourth is public dollars to private schools. And this is, and I have said this, we're not going to be putting this on the table and kicking down the front doors of the State House with this issue again unless we're standing shoulder to shoulder with the NEA on this issue. They have sat this issue out. And they have said, at least in our discussions, they're ready to stand with us. It's the right time, they think it's the right issue, and so this is a restatement of our resolution that says in order for an independent school to be eligible to receive public education funds, it should operate with an open admissions policy, administer state assessments, provide free and reduced lunch, and employ teachers and administrators who have licenses. Tuition dollars should remain in state, and dual enrollment vouchers should not be expanded to private school students. And then the last one is as like a potpourri of issues, when we put them under the category of safe and healthy schools. And that has to do with school facilities, that has to do with addressing issues associated with student mental health, adverse childhood experiences and social emotional needs, and ensuring that we are getting much clearer about whose responsibility it is to deliver those services and how they're paid for. So to the extent it is clearly identified as a human service need or a social service need, that is it appropriate to have the education fund pay for that service rather than the general fund? So the specific asks here is that we would look to the General Assembly to fully fund any new obligations placed on school with regard to like lead testing in waters or radon testing, reestablish capital construction aid in order to support school facility modernization, ensure proper coordination and effective management among state departments and agencies responsible for safe and healthy school environments. And then again, identifying what the obligations of schools should be in addressing mental health needs and ensure those costs are properly allocated to whatever pocket we think they need to be allocated, and then also sufficiently funded. So those are the 5 buckets. We haven't, like I said, we've done nothing but meet several times, and we're meeting again on Thursday. And I would like to know from you all whether or not you're generally in support of the approach, in support of the 5 buckets. It doesn't prohibit us from advocating for other things, or even within the same bucket having slightly nuanced differences in terms of the interest. But I do think the point of this exercise is to take a more proactive approach, to take a more coordinated approach, and not allow ourselves to be pitted against one another in an attempt to weaken public education. So, any questions or comments?
Anyone have anything they'd like to?
A couple of little things in there that I would, but I think overall it's a great approach. As a former committee chair, it's great when people can not work together, because it gives you a reason not to do anything. You know, when you guys get your act together, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, Don stole my thunder, because I think it's exactly what happens, is when we fight against each other, then they say, well, we just don't know what to do, so we'll do nothing. But I think it's great.
Anything else, Diane?
I just like the idea that you simplified it down when we talk about education, to the legislators, I'm sure it seems like huge. And now if you can say, if it doesn't come within this kind of 5 areas, let's not look at it kind of thing. And that would be really helpful to me as trying to actually get change done.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that.
Okay.
When will that go public?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about on Thursday.
For the few competing interests that we have, there's so many that are in a line, and it's kind of crazy that those few competing interests could create a void to begin with. And I'm really happy to hear the work that you're doing to get those things that we are in line with in the forefront.
Hey, it's in the strategic plan. That's what I do.
Do you have a sense of what the NEA's appetite is for collaboration on this one? I mean, you mentioned sort of 2 ends of the gamut was we're all together at a press conference versus we're all just sort of saying similar things but not together. Where do you think?
So that's what I've been pushing. I think the appetite was quite high when there was a belief that proposal from Dan would see the light of day. So I think whatever transpires this week is going to lead us to make, lead us to different decision points. But I'm not gonna say, my opening testimony is we're focusing on all these issues, and then look behind me and they're not there. And I've said that, and they're very, they're clear about that. So I think we just need to try and pin people down and get some commitments and make a plan. But I think certainly there's a commitment to. I think there would be a commitment to submitting joint testimony that had all these pieces on it and reiterating these points during the session. I think all of us are wary of a press conference or an op-ed because the environment is so dynamic and uncertain. It'd be great if public education weren't in the spotlight this year, frankly. And I don't know that we need to call attention to it and create controversy where maybe we could have gotten through the session without one. So I think there's some gauging of the environment that really, between the inaugural address and the budget address, I think we're gonna a path will be clear. But I trust Jeff at his word that he's committed to these things.
Okay, on the phone?
Jim?
Jim?
Yeah, it's Jim Salzgiver. I'm just, I think I'm not sure I got quite everything and all the comments on the working with NEA, but aren't there some significant issues where we're likely to butt heads with NEA as well?
I do, well,
Okay.
the healthcare piece is a separate piece. I mean, so for example, this morning, I was invited to testify in Senate Ed on Friday to provide an update on statewide bargaining. And my first move was to forward the email to Jeff Vannon and say, we need to do this together. What do you think? Yes, I'm not here on Friday. Great. So we're doing it together next week. So we are gonna continue, we've worked really hard to keep it positive to this point. And I don't believe, although he said, they may have a couple tweaks they wanna make to that one. But we're talking about it. I said, well, I would like to see them. If you're gonna come in with anything. So the fact that we're gonna be appearing before the committee together sends a signal to the committee that we don't need you to interfere here. We've got this. We're acting like grown-ups, and we're doing what you've asked us to do. So far. What happens
Well, I think
in
there's
spring and
definitely an
fall?
advantage to working better and closer with NEA. But I guess, my initial thought is, maybe there's, you can work closely with them without being arm in arm on, I'm not sure we're going to be able to be arm in arm on everything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we know that. They are going to introduce legislation regulating third-party administrators, so future planning types. Like, there's no authority for the state to regulate those entities. And I said, show me your language. It's possible we would think it's okay, and it's also possible the regulation would be so burdensome that health equity would pull out of the state, and that would be a problem. So, the point is, we're clear that we're not gonna agree on everything. There's no way I'm gonna be co-opted by the NEA, and there's no way they're gonna be co-opted by us. But in the environment that we've experienced for the last couple of years, and in particular in light of what Secretary French the direction they appeared to be going, it made a lot of sense for us to identify what are the things we agree on that we can be working towards together in the State House. But totally appreciate your point, Jim.
Yes.
And I think if we looked at the press conference we did last year with the NEA and the other people, I think that bore a lot of fruit because they didn't play it the same way. They didn't go into closed door negotiations.
Right.
They didn't do that at all. They didn't talk about it. In fact, after our press conference, they said, we're not gonna do that.
Well, yeah, they repeated our talking points.
Yeah. So I think we have established that it can work if we work together. Where we can work together, let's work together.
Right. I think to me, the question is how much capital are they willing to spend on some of these issues if they've got something else they want? And that's the calculus they always make. Even if in principle they think it's a good idea, they won't go to battle if they think they need to save their juice for something else. We do that too.
Kim?
On the universal full-day pre-K for all 4-year-olds, does that bring it within the schools and counting an ADM as a full ADM? So basically it would be in our pre-K-12 funding in the ed fund. Despite the fact we might like to fly under the radar this year, if that were to be an option, if that has support, is that something that would be worth forging, even if somehow education gets a pass on some other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think you heard Kate, that they're expecting a report. I believe the report is going to affirm a lot of the concerns that we've raised. That would be nice to have so it's not like our side versus the other side, and anecdote versus anecdote, but an objective analysis of the law. But that is going to draw the ire of the early childhood community, make no mistake about it. And they've got their own think tank report that they had a press conference about today that they're gonna be pushing. So it's not, so I think it just depends on, there's nothing stopping us from going in and saying, we think you should look at this, and we think this makes sense. It was part of a bill last year, so it's not gonna be a foreign concept to the education. The members of the education committee that are returning endorsed that concept last year. It's the human services committee that stopped it in its tracks. So I think the question is the speaker ready to make this a priority? And I think that's probably gonna take the objective report saying, you got serious problems with the way you've set up this program.
And the timeline, I think I'm recalling she said, was that it won't even report out until March or April. So it's unlikely that if this were a recommendation to come out, that it happens in this session. Is that
Right.
accurate?
I would see this as a multi-year effort.
And I guess as I continue to be a little bit frustrated that the early ed seems to be pitted against our efforts when there is not the capacity to serve.
Right.
And so I wonder if they couldn't view this as an opportunity to amp up capacity in their birth to 3. I mean,
Right.
we are not flush with capacity in this arena.
Right.
So-
It's just more costly to serve birth to 3. The 4-year-olds, because you can have higher ratios,
Yeah.
bring the cost structure down for the entire business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's the thing.
That's
I think
what
that probably is one of the 4-year-olds is something that all the partners can stake on. The NEA is gonna want the positions for their union. That's there. We want the money full-time for students for them. And we also wanna be able to control what's going on and not have to farm out our money, you know? So, and the Principals Association, Superintendents Association would like to be shed of the headache of joint agency stuff, so it's kind of a win-win for different reasons, but for all 4 of us. So that may be something that gets some play.
Are STARS qualifications different at age 3 than 4?
No.
Okay. Just know if there's something that backs off when they lose their.
No, but if we're serving them in a public program, we don't have to worry about STARS.
No, I didn't, I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking for our sake, I was
Oh.
thinking for any pushback that providers might have, or the birth to 3, if there was some trade-off for losing the ability to have larger classes, that meant if you're serving only up to 3, that you don't have to have something.
Right. Well, I think if you're not offering pre-K, you maybe don't have to have a licensed educator on site.
Right.
You don't.
Okay, we got, yes.
So real quick, I'm sorry, so may I offer for your bin number 5 in terms of those types of programs that are social types of programs? If the legislature is, pulling back in terms of refund, putting that money out there, perhaps they would be willing to identify what those positions are so we could pull them out of our costs so that that is not included in our per equalized student costs. Because right now, in our school, we're going to increase those costs by about $12,000 to pay for a degree that one of our staff has gotten, and we do not want to lose him. So it would be, give us the money, or if you can't do that, at the very least, let's pull it out of our costs so that it's not a part of per equalized student expense.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's
Cool.
some nuance to it, but, because they'll have to, if it's not part of your per pupil spending that goes into your tax rate, the state's gonna have to give you the money somehow to fund it. So, so they're paying for it either way, but I think, that's a good, at the very least, you shouldn't be penalized for it.
Right.
Take that out of the excess spending calculation.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes, thank you, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot there, and we'll be probably revisiting this every month to see where we're going with it, and how everything is materializing. It was, reading that document on the executive committee was pretty, pretty shocking. And that all the work we've done in the last few years, and they just send out this notice that they'd like to put the VSBA and the Superintendent's Association principals just out of business. They aren't needed anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
No state board, no school boards, 4 superintendents for the state.
It's a great idea. That's the first thing the report said.
Well, and when I think about the challenges as a large district unifying that had 2 superintendents and now bringing them together under one, that body of work is immense for a single superintendent to do, probably no matter what the structure used to be. So I don't know how they expect there to be educational leadership in the way that would be needed to realize the potential merger.
Well,
and the
that
opportunity.
leadership's gonna come out of the Golden Dome every spring.
And it plays not at all on the ground with educators. You build a culture around educational leadership, and it's hard to do in a huge school district.
This is Linda.
One state.
Yes.
Is it their proposal then to perhaps put teachers more in charge? Is that what they're looking for? Is to have more of a role in setting policy and?
No, the state would set the policy.
No.
The state would set the policy, the state would set the budget, the state would set the curriculum, the state would do everything. Employees would be state
But are
employees.
representing, they represent teachers, so are teachers behind this from the end?
No, this is not an NEA proposal, sorry. This was a thought exercise from the Secretary of Education.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, I missed that at the very beginning,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry. Yes, that would be confusing.
Yes.
So the NEA does not support that proposal.
So we got to get back on track here and talk about.
Can I just ask, just because I just want to be clear what your expectation is. Am I empowered to work with the other associations and be on the record on these 5? I don't know that if you want to take a vote but I would like more than just a discussion.
I'll make a motion in that regard to empower.
You will move that the executive director be empowered to enter a collaborative with these other organizations
Absolutely.
regarding our presentations for the,
Yes.
or desires
Yes,
for
I'll
the,
second that, it's Linda.
yes, seconded by Linda.
Thank you.
Yes, I
All
made a
right.
motion if the
Does that-
executive director.
does that cover you?
Yeah, so
feel
empowered
good
to
with that?
work with the other organizations to advance our shared 2019 education policy priorities.
Yes.
That's his motion, that's what I heard you
Yes.
say.
Seconded by
That's,
Linda.
yes.
Empowered to work with the other organizations to
Advance our shared
Yes.
2019.
Awesome.
Policy.
shared 2019 policy.
Hi, this is Lori. I'm wondering if those 5 buckets that you're talking about, is that written down somewhere?
It is, but I have not distributed it.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to know is this, the thoughts of the Secretary of State, are they public? Is that public information?
Well, I think if you asked for it, it would be considered a public record. However, it has not been made public.
Maybe after tomorrow.
I was told that by the end of this week, a new version of the document, which I have not seen, would be on the agency's website. I am expecting the governor's speech tomorrow to allude to the need to design a new, simpler system for delivery of education, one that frees resources cradle to career, and inviting Vermonters to participate in the design process.
Could it conflict of interest to write that for him?
Something along those lines, and I think that will then be the cue to post that document online.
Okay, Jim Salzgiver here, just on the 5 different issues, I think is it your view that all 5 fit within our current set of resolutions?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
So you'd look at it, my concern is once it, gets into writing between VSBA and NEA that, that it continue to be consistent with what the membership has designated as important issues and the way they presented them.
Right. That's my job, as I see it, to make sure that that happens. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
This is Dan MacArthur. I appreciated, Nicole, what you said way back at the beginning of this discussion, that those 5 buckets are movable targets as well. And I think that we all just keep that in mind, that this is a process, not cast in stone. So I support this wholeheartedly.
Okay, anybody else?
Do you want me to read the motion again?
We already have the motion. We need
Call the
to,
question, Mr. Chairman.
oh, any questions?
I said I call the question.
Call the question. Oh, any objections? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion, anyone abstaining? Not, therefore the motion's carried, so declared.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we can get on to the NSBA annual conference discussion attendance fees for VSBA board members.
So I think we can get through this relatively quickly. I don't think there needs to be any action at this point. The only person outside the executive committee that expressed interest in attending the annual conference was Don. So I think we can make it work to register. I believe it's.
When does registration have to be early?
So early registration deadline is Friday.
Okay.
So I would invite members of the executive committee and Don to confirm with Carrie by Friday that you are planning to attend so that we can register you.
I have registered.
And you have already registered.
Clarence and Neil.
Clarence, Neil, Sue, and myself.
Yes.
Clarence and Neil attend, the president and the vice president attend every year as a matter of course, because, and just to be clear, what we need to do on our end, we didn't really have a sense of how many people wanted to go. What we need to now do on our end is, once registration is covered, how much can we offer, if any, to cover transportation and board for those who are interested in going. So that's basically your update on that. And let us know by Friday.
All right, any other questions on that? If not, we'll move on. Strategic plan monitoring report, that's in your packet.
If I may, I just wanted to pull one thing out of here from my own piece on Act 173 that I think is going to be of interest to folks. Part of the charge to the advisory group that we're on was to develop a recommendation to bring back to the legislature to align independent schools that accept publicly funded students, align the funding model for them with the funding model for public schools. So for public schools receiving census block grant model, it was totally unworkable to have independent schools who they pay tuition for to continue to be able to send reimbursement invoices for special education expenses, because we're moving away from the reimbursement model and SUs and LEAs are going to have a finite amount of funds. And so we worked with our partners with the VCSEA. The Council of Special Ed Administrators really helped us develop a concept and a proposal that would essentially bifurcate the schools so that we treated the largest independent schools that accept public funds like public schools, and that they will now also receive a block grant from the LEA, and they will be under similar pressure to reconsider the way they deliver services to students, much like public schools are going to be asked to do for the smaller independent schools that serve fewer than 100 students and have fewer than 65% of those students publicly funded. They will continue to be able to operate on a reimbursement model, but it's going to be more tightly controlled. Right now, any school can charge sort of up to a maximum rate, and this proposal they have to demonstrate actual costs, and the rates that they're allowed to submit back to the LEA must reflect costs that are in line with the costs that are paid by the public schools. So that was a significant, we got a very strong vote out of the group to go to the General Assembly with that recommendation. I thought the conversation with the independent school representatives on the committee, while they did not support the proposal, they were hoping to keep it at the 4 historic academies and not 2 other schools that accept large numbers of public funds. So Long Trail and Sharon Academy. So they didn't support the ultimate motion, but it was a very, I thought, productive and collaborative discussion that didn't center on a position that said we shouldn't have to play by these rules. It was, how do we make it work for their members, which is that's their role. So I'm going to meet again with their lobbyists later this week to continue to understand sort of what their concerns are. But I think we have a strong recommendation coming out of that group, which was good, and that sets the stage for I think a good conversation with the General Assembly about that topic. Did you have anything you wanted to in particular call out, or maybe we want to just let people ask questions? The big deal is Jennifer's on.
Yeah.
Sue's spent a lot of time
about me
making that.
Next one, I get questions ready.
And I guess the one thing I would call attention to on mine, my section is that I'm working with the school crisis planning team. They've given some policies to me about threat assessment, behavioral threat assessment, surveillance cameras and access control, and I'm going to be taking a look at those and trying to put them in a format that's consistent with our model policy format, and then sending it back to them, and VSBA will be taking a look at them, and there's school districts are expressing a real need for these type of policies, so hopefully we'll be getting those out as quickly as possible.
Okay.
This is Susan. I just want to take one quick second. I am in the process, as has been reported in the past, of setting up my visits to school boards around the state. And once I have those dates confirmed, I will let the appropriate regional representatives know my plans, and I'd love to have your company.
Okay.
And Susan has spent a lot of time getting us ready for trying to cast.
The circle.
Not that.
So it is January, of course.
January is School Board Recognition Month. You should be getting your cards with your darn tough coupons. And we just sent this out to superintendents today, a list of suggested activities, a recognition certificate template for people to recognize members of their school board. Sue arranged for a state resolution to be read January 15th, 10 a.m. Those of you who can make it, we'd love to have you. I think we're going to try to Facebook Live it without the emojis this time. So Susan's done just a great job getting this together. And I think the Darn Tough coupon is just a wonderful touch. So check your mailboxes this week.
Okay. Any other questions on the strategic plan? If not, thank you for everyone for the job they've done. VSBA committees, VSBA regional and strategic plan updates. We have, what do we have for the committees? Are the committees that from each region that was sending out their reports to their introduction to everybody. I saw Chittenden whatever, Chittenden and Essex?
Grand Isle. Grand Isle.
Grand Isle, I'm
We always
sorry.
forget about those islands up there.
So but this is a new committee that's in response to a resolution that is directing the VSBA board to re-examine. Thank you, Celeste, re-examine our regions.
Aha, yes.
Yes, so this is actually our prompt to you, that you need to form a committee to look at that issue. We also want to offer, your strategic plan is up in July. We like to try to have this board model good practice that we recommend to member boards. And process that we recommend is that you form a committee that looks at options for updating your strategic plan. So you can think about that.
So we need 2 committees?
You don't necessarily need to appoint them tonight. If you want, if you're like, I want to do this, great. But I would offer that you consider serving on one of 2 committees, and we can take action to appoint them at the February meeting. There's no
Okay.
real urgency to do it tonight, but I did want to call it to your attention. This is work that you have as a board ahead of you.
So those 2 committees will be appointed to, filled up at the next meeting or before, so anyone interested, get a hold of Nicole, or?
How much time do you anticipate for each of those committees?
I believe the strategic plan committee would probably take more. I mean, I really don't have an idea in my mind. I think it depends on where the conversation goes. The resolution, we can pull up on the screen on the regions, so you can see that. It asks the board to consider a number of things. So it's on page 10 of the resolutions. For those of you on the phone, the VSBA board should review the current regional boundaries with an eye to updating them so that all operating towns in one school district are in the same region. That seems reasonable. And the board should consider realigning its regions with those of the VSA. That would be a substantial change. I believe they have 5 regions, we have 11. And the board should consider creating a single region to represent the non-operating towns so that their needs, concerns, and issues are more clearly represented on the VSBA board. So I think the first bucket is relatively straightforward. The other 2 are certainly more complex. So if that's the type of thing you're interested in digging into, I would be the staff person supporting that committee. Susan has volunteered to support the strategic planning committee. And really, I think the role of the strategic planning committee is to come back with a recommendation to the board around how we should, a process for updating the strategic plan. I think, I want to caution you against just rolling it over another 3 years. I think given all the changes in our membership over the past 3 years, not necessarily, we haven't lost or changed members, but our members look different. And their needs may be different. And it might be a good opportunity to check in with them around the direction of this organization. And doing a strategic plan provides you an opportunity to do that.
Gaston?
Are there documents that I can go to just to kind of peruse through and kind of get a feel for
Yeah, so
what
have you
it
gotten
is?
one of these books yet?
No.
If not, Carrie will get you one. That has our resolutions, our strategic
thank you.
plan, our policies.
Thank you.
Sorry you have to have one.
I'll say mine.
Real cheap.
Is that information enough for all the committees? That we have these 2 main functions that need to be dealt with, and so please either volunteer or Nicole and I will be volunteering you to how to take care of this. Now that we have the state board proposal on all of forced mergers, we know where theoretically everyone is going to line up, so we might be able to realign the districts better. Not given the, I don't know what the status of the legal question is, when we might have an answer to that, or whether it's just been filed or where it's been filed, so will it be years or months or?
Right, that's a.
Who knows?
And the resolution doesn't have a deadline, but I think it's worth being able to go back to the membership in October and say, we looked at this issue and here's where we're at. And so again, you don't need to form the committee and start meeting in February, but it was important to me to put it on your plate.
So when it gets forgotten, it was our fault. No, I say that.
Has the map of the reconfigured school district supervisory union map been updated since the state board acted?
I believe there is an updated map on the
AOE site.
AOE's website along with the state board order.
I think so too.
I just saw it.
Because that's gonna be the basis where you start looking at regions. So,
Right.
is there any other region that sent out a report that wants to talk about what they're doing in their region?
I can maybe just share back, we had only one person respond, did we talk to you about?
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah.
But your answer was perfect, so.
Yeah, it was a board member about to embark on negotiations, and we had heard that Burlington had settled, and to what extent are we allowed, the question was, how can that information be shared to the extent people know it? Can we reach out to the board members? And as far as I knew, I did not believe that there was an option for, they referenced the fact that it is very likely that the NEA had already shared what that settlement was gonna be with their other union associations from school to school before they were to enter into bargaining. And those of us beginning bargaining, you know, from the management side of things, really would not be going in with that information. I didn't think that there was a way that we were sharing that information among boards when it's not yet been approved. And I said, I assumed if Nicole thought differently, she would chime in, was basically my response. So that was that was the only person I think that responded anything other than thank you guys for doing it kind of stuff, so.
Okay,
I can tell you that schools won't give us their contracts for the contract database until it's been ratified.
Yeah.
And then the digger will have it and tell us about it anyway.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, the media will likely have it.
Yes, they'll have that.
Yeah.
Once it's public.
okay.
This is Lori Childers again. I heard the strategic plan committee, but I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what the other committee was you were talking about, Nicole.
So it's a committee to examine the VSBA regional boundaries. So we have 11 regions, but with the school district mergers that have happened over the past 3 years, some have school districts that are in multiple regions at the moment. And so we had a resolution directing the board to review the regional boundaries. And those are in the bylaws, so any recommendations you make will have to be put before the members at the annual business meeting in October.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Let's see, strategic plan. Number 7 was Dan's question for the agenda, and he's asked that we skip that because it's too hard to handle it when he's on the phone over the radio, so we'll put that on next month.
Can we take up tobacco again? And then, I mean, I'll take some tobacco, but since we have some time. And then I did want to just say one thing in response to the document that Dan had submitted. And Dan and Christina, I'm sorry you're not here, but the resolution or document you submitted was the first we had heard that Wyndham Northeast is not planning to pay their dues this year. And so we reached out to them and have asked to be included on their board's agenda for January 23rd at 6:30. And I would invite the two of you to come join me. The purpose, and Susan, the purpose is not to convince them to pay their dues. We reviewed their board's minutes, and it is very apparent that there was a lot of misinformation about the VSBA, about the services that are provided, about what non-payment of dues means. And so our purpose is really to go and make sure folks on the board know that, number one, we care, that they're, whether they're members or not. And number two, we want to make sure they have accurate information about this association and what it exists to do. So I'd invite you two to consider, if you have time, to join us as their representatives on this board. And I'll
Can you
follow
send
up.
us that, the time, date and time of that again, Nicole? That would be great.
I will do that, yes. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you. I will pencil that in. It looks like I can make it.
Great.
Okay, that would be good. So we have this tobacco request for support that we were talking about earlier. We could deal with that now. We've had comments. The easiest way to handle this is somebody make a motion and we'll debate it and vote on it.
So make a motion, Clarence, to move forward with this and supporting this.
Supporting this.
I'll second that.
Who's the
I
second?
made a motion to
Christina.
move forward
Don
supporting.
Collins, to support the proposal from Tobacco Free Vermont.
Okay,
Support.
all right, yes.
Proposal.
So I hate seeing young people with vape pens or smoking or chewing tobacco. Hate it, hate it, hate it. But man, can I not remember January 29, 1998, I left my high school and I drove up the road to the neighbor's convenience store and bought my first pack of cigarettes. And that feeling of exercising my civil liberty to medicate myself in a way that at the time felt like I owned something. I had found a way to deal with the stress of my school, to deal with the stress, and I felt like an adult. And I swear, when a document like this shows up that is 2 full pages of logical fallacies, it's really serving an agenda that feels no more like a valid piece of legislation than a vanity project like a border wall. This is moving a age limitation from 18 to 21, which would show up in the media a fair amount. It would support Tobacco Free Vermont's overall agenda, but it's a waste of time. It is treating adults, changing the age at which people get to make their own decisions about how they balance their wellness and health. It's a lot more to it than just saying nicotine is bad and we should not allow people 18 years old to 21 to use it because it's bad. Once you're 18 years old, you're an adult in this country, and you have the civil liberty to balance your wellness in the ways that you choose. You can discover what works and what doesn't. A lot of the things that are in this paper that is represented here, I represent nicotine as a really, really bad thing, bad drug. Well, cigarette smoking is certainly, plenty of research shows that cigarette smoking is bad. But nicotine itself is not much different than caffeine, Adderall, Ritalin, any of these things that we use to medicate ourselves for the many stresses and issues that we deal with in our lives. And it's something that I personally would not support. And I have spoken to my local representatives, as a matter of fact, for the last time that this was on, I saw news of this in the legislative agenda, because I consider it a waste of time to try and move an age 3 years thinking that's going to make a big impact on the overall well-being of our adult youth, the 18-year-old people. I might be the youngest person. Oh, maybe not. I certainly remember the wonderful things that cigarette smoking brought to me. Now, I have quit smoking because I very much realized that it's not good for my overall health. But at the time when I was 18 years old, and the first couple years of college, it was an amazing way for me to meet people, to break through some social barriers, to find things that I could share with my peers. And it really sounds odd to defend something that is as detrimental as this, but I love my civil liberties much more than I detest seeing young people using tobacco.
Okay, that's, we'll try to handle this pro and con. That was con, is there pro? Someone like to speak pro? You've been up once, Diane, we'll get back to you. Gio?
So, you know, Lucas, I was struggling with that whole civil liberties thing, that, you know, that you're 18 and you can be in the military and fight and die for your country, but you can't go buy a pack of cigarettes. So I've been struggling with that since this came up tonight, and I've been thinking about that. And for me, this product falls into a different category. In an ideal world, there's no way in hell we would have let this go. Had we known what tobacco does to people, there's no way. We legislate against different chemicals that should probably legislate against more chemicals. But there's numerous instances of agricultural chemicals you can't use anymore because we know they're bad. FDA has to approve drugs. You have to wear helmets in most states, except for the Live Free or Die place, which they die like flies over there when they wreck their motorcycles. But so I think so. I've been wrestling with this, and I think I'm thinking that this is a product that's just evil, and we're especially at the cusp of the vaping stuff. We're introducing a new thing, and kids have been smoking in less numbers over the years, and now they're starting to vape in much higher numbers. So it's cool. They're going for it, and I think, I don't know. Just to me, we need to nip this in the bud. And so, civil liberties aside, I think we should join in on this motion.
Okay, the motion is to approve support this. Is there someone else that'd like to speak the other way?
Con, this
Yes.
is Celeste,
Yes?
and I agree with Gio's first part of his discussion. I think as long as we legislate the fact that our 18-year-olds are old enough to go to war and die for us, then they can smoke or drink. And I think it's foolish of us to think we're telling them that we care about them when we obviously don't. And I just do not see how this is anything to do with our role in the school board association. To me, it's like legalizing pot. It's really not our business. We're about educating kids. We'll educate them not to do those stupid things and possibly even be passive resistors to war. I'm done.
Okay.
This is Linda.
Yep.
I would rather see us advocate to do something with poverty for the people who smoke because they don't have enough money and they smoke because it gives them a little bit of a high to get through the day. I mean, I'm a special educator. I've seen families in poverty, you know, and you say, well, how can you afford that cigarette? But on the other hand, it's sort of like it's the only thing sometimes that stops them from doing something that they may want to do to a child or to themselves and smoke. I don't think we have any business in it either. I agree that it's terrible, it's disgusting, and but I don't think we should. I would rather us work on poverty.
Okay. Laura?
So I had a question to begin with. If this bill was also allocating money for education and recovery, because I don't see it as part of that.
This is the first part this is the first time I've seen this, and if this is all you have to look at, then you're not getting the full story. Mm-hmm. So the Vermont Department of Health, I'm going to end up talking. Are you okay?
Yes. You're on her dime, so
They've
it's not a
now
problem.
announced it to be a full-on public health crisis. And this is the nicotine ruling, which is in our schools and our youth. And I think that there's this whole other argument that if we can get more people off of cigarettes and on, that are already smokers, and smoking something that is questionable about its harmful effects, it's certainly not as polluting, that's another whole issue. But this actually does fall into our bucket of health and safety initiatives in schools. And the crisis is with our youth, not with the adults smoking or switching from smoking to vaping. So I feel like we don't have a good piece in front of us if you really want to hear all the information.
So that was my question, like, if this bill, if this, you know, I'm not gonna debate the age here, I come from a country where everything is at 18, but I'm focused on what we do pre-K to 12, right? So if it said something about education here, it will help. I am totally in agreement
The
with
reason
what
that
Gio said.
it's coming into our schools is because we have 18-year-olds that can access it, and they have gotten to a point where they are dealing in it in our schools. Our principals are running around ragged with the discipline part of it. So it's coming into the middle schools. And that's the vehicle that it's coming in through.
Yeah.
I can keep going.
No, it's okay, we're familiar, we have a huge.
Anybody else?
So can I make a motion to postpone this until the February meeting to allow us time to get a better document out front of us to kind of review this, or not?
You can, at this point in time, we have a motion on the floor to approve this. If you would like to move to table this until the February meeting, that's the only thing that's proper at this time. So if that's your case, move to table this issue.
So my understanding then is when we come back in February, it has to be removed from, this came up in a board meeting, and so this whole thing with postpone is different from
If you move
table.
to table until the February meeting, it will come back up in February.
All right, that's what I'm
That's taken
moving.
care of, it doesn't have to come off the table.
Before I second that, is there more information you can be getting us, Diane, that would help us?
There is, but I'm not part of this particular initiative, so I was like surprised to even see this. I'm actually advocating for the same legislation through my legislators based on health information and based on the fact that it has come through before and was fairly close to passing. So I can give you more information, I'm just not sure if that's really my role. I'm looking at Sue.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, all that's proper here, if you wanna make the motion to table is basically, that's voted.
Yes, that's what I'd like to do.
So moved.
So, yes.
Wait,
Someone wanna second the motion to table till the February meeting?
I'll make a second to table it to the February meeting.
Motion's been made and seconded to table it till the February meeting. Now, you're testing me here, folks.
Come on, Clarence, it's easy for you.
I think the motion to table is a non-debatable motion. So it's a non-debatable
So now we
motion,
can't
therefore
ask
all
more
those in favor of the motion to table, say aye.
no.
What was
Those
that?
opposed?
That's too quick, Clarence. I'm not ready to vote yet because I didn't hear you,
It's non-debatable.
Right.
Motion's made and seconded, so therefore I'm asking all of those in favor of the motion to table. Say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Can I have a point of
Those
order
opposed?
first?
Yes,
Nay.
point of order, go ahead.
If I want to be able to ask about additional information that would help inform a February decision, I am guessing I need to vote no to table because I can't ask a question after it's been tabled, can I?
But then you'd have to vote tonight.
I don't think
I just want to know
it's being tabled.
what is going to help us
Suggestion
decide
was
this
we
in
want more
February.
information, so what do you want to ask? You want more?
I want to know if there are additional sources of information that help inform this question.
I believe there are, and Diane had referred to them, so there are some
Wait,
things.
I'm asking, I guess I'm
So
asking.
we're working with the coalition, Tobacco Free Vermont. If this board wants more information, Sue has attended the meeting, Sue can ask them to supply documents that would inform, if you have specific questions that you feel like you would like addressed and can get them to Sue. That way we can make sure the materials you get are responsive to your questions.
To the questions.
That would be helpful.
Okay,
And there may be a bill by then.
Yeah.
so let
We can
me
look at that
finish
too.
up the motion to table. All right, to answer your point of order, we can get you the information and it will be available at the meeting time. Just let the people know what you want. All right? Now, where were we? All those in favor, those opposed?
Nay.
We will like a show of hands, all right? Can't have a show of hands on the telephone, so all those
I can
people,
read them off.
I will call the roll, and we'll start with the people on the telephone, and the rest of us here will do it by show of hands after we call the roll for the telephone.
Hey, Carrie.
All right, Adrian, are you on the phone? No. Amy McMullen.
You know the health effects are bad, so
She used to be there. Celeste?
it's a civil rights issue.
I'm on the phone and I vote nay.
You vote not
Wait a
to
minute.
table it.
Am I voting on?
The motion is to table.
Until
The
February.
motion is to table, yes, table.
Okay.
Yes, A.
Dan MacArthur, yes or no to table?
Nay, I think we should take this up now.
All right. Jim Salzgiver, yes or no to table?
Yes.
Christina Naylor,
No.
Lori Childers,
Yes.
Linda Smith,
Yes.
Sarah McLean.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, Susan. That. Okay, that's everybody on the phone. Did I call everyone's name that's on the phone? Okay.
And all those present, all those in favor of the motion to table, raise your hand.
We need to go the other way.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
There's 5 yeses on the phone.
Oh, I thought I had 4, but 5. All right. All those opposed?
I have 2 no's on the phone.
3
And 2 no's on the
and 2
phone.
on the phone is 5. Motion to table is carried. It will be on the agenda in February. Thank you very much for your patience. First quarter financial report.
Other ways for
I have to leave grandchild to put to bed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you all.
Don't fall asleep yourself, okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, the status of the VSBA is sound. We carry a cash balance of $490. Points worth mentioning and drawing your attention to. Our income was less than anticipated for the annual conference, but so were our expenses. So we had previously budgeted a profit margin of $10,000, and it resulted in a profit margin of $12,641. The carry forward is we are moving it just so as you're looking at this quarter over quarter, we moved it to the bottom beneath our income and expenses. It was buried within our income because we were budgeting to zero out our profit or income and expenses and just put that carryover as an income item. Moving it below the line allows us to see whether we're ending up sort of with a net income or we're using our carryover, basically. So just so as you're looking at this, it used to be an income and now it's beneath the expenses. It's easier to see. And in that category, we would have thought we might have been using some of that carry forward and we've not needed to. So we'll keep an eye on that as we go through. On the third, our dues, we've got the list of those who've not yet paid, and I had asked Carrie, these were due November 1, and Carrie, I think, has made calls to everybody.
I have, and all of them have returned a call to me and basically said that it's been lost or whatever. But they're all planning on paying, except I haven't heard back from River Valley Tech Center. I called them 2 or 3 times now. I don't know, maybe somebody's on vacation, it's a possibility, or working on their budget. That small thing.
Yeah.
And Wyndham Northeast that's the
That's
they
the
s-
one that-
yeah. They said they voted on, they said that, the business manager told me that they voted to not be members, but their minutes don't show that, so that's someone we have to talk about.
Yep. So I appreciate you making those calls, Terry, and I appreciate that Nicole and Sue are going to visit. Or Susan,
yes.
sorry, I'm looking at Sue, I'm thinking Susan. And then equipment leases, we are transitioning to a new copier, and with that, we are, it was in arrears on our, we invoiced late, right?
No,
And
they didn't give us the
they didn't
invoice
give us
yet.
the invoice until this had closed. But the, we also pay for, on number 5, the newsletter item that comes in expenses is, is it less or greater now? I'm looking, it's less than what was anticipated. And remind me again, Carrie, that we pay for the
Okay,
use
Riley.
of our copier, and it is related to the number of copies we make.
Our invoice for our copiers, it has a flat amount for the lease, and then it also has per copy.
And the newsletter is one of our biggest drivers of our copies, right? Am I getting that right? Thank you.
Yes, you are.
She and I had to have a conversation to clarify that initially, so thank you for clarifying it again. Any questions on any of it?
Questions on the financial report?
I have, this is Lori Childers.
Hi, Lori.
Hi, Kim. I looked at, I went back and looked at November 30, 2017 balance sheet, and then, because I was surprised that the balance sheet for 2018 had a $327,000 net income. And I think, I'm wondering if maybe 2017 didn't get closed out.
Of course.
Because 2017, the net income from 2017 should roll into the unrestricted net assets.
No, unrestricted is an amount set by the board. It doesn't roll into it.
Unrestricted is?
No, the restricted is, I'm sorry.
Restricted is set.
Right. So I mean, and you and I can talk about this offline. It's kind of technical accounting stuff, but it looks to me like last year's books haven't been closed out.
Yes. The auditor has closed out our books.
I believe that there's also an adjustment.
So last year we got a net income of $302,000. It's from the balance sheet that I'm looking at that we got in December of 2017.
Right, they don't take that. They don't take the total balance. They don't close that out.
Yes, you have.
Our auditor doesn't do that. She gives me the journal entries, and she's never, in 20 years, I've never had to give me an entry.
It's a part of opening a new year. So your income statement would come back to zero, and the prior year income would roll into whatever type of equity account you have.
Right.
She's never given me that journal entry. I'll ask her about it. I'm glad to ask her about it.
Part of what it gets confused in there too, and I'd love to talk to both of you guys later if we want to, so I can make sure we're asking the right questions. But there is an adjustment that happens around the investment in Prospect Street. It's a collaborative, and we own the building, and there's some partnership interest in that, and there's expense that shows up in our rental figures. There's, what I recall is that it is not as clean as it would seem intuitively it should be, that there should be a direct line in those areas. And one such thing is the prior period adjustment. We set out the 200,000 as restricted, the rest is unrestricted, but there is some piece of it that is related to, is it depreciation in the partnership?
Yeah, but that should show up in
I think
that line item.
This is Jim Salzgiver. Just, as an accounting type myself, I think that, fundamentally equity, net income does get closed out into typically retained earnings, which in our case would be net assets unrestricted. So I kind of have to agree with the point that, it looks a little odd to have net income in there. Really, that's not really an equity account. Net income's an income statement item versus balance sheet item.
So it's
Okay.
great to have some accountants on the board.
Yes.
And
And
we'll
I'm glad to
ask the
talk to you.
auditor that question.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
these reports come right off of QuickBooks. I don't do anything to them, so I
Yeah,
don't know how
but
to
if-
change that.
She does the journal, the auditor.
Yeah, she
Right.
does
Yeah.
the journal entries.
I think this is and off the line, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a place for this discussion, but I think it's a good point.
Absolutely, and I appreciate it because we,
And I'm happy to be a part of a discussion if you want.
thank you to those of you who are interested in the conversation, because I think even in moving our carry forward number down, it was basically tracking whether or not we ended up with a net income or we needed to use some of our unrestricted funds, because when we budget, we're doing zero-based budgeting, and so we're, rather than budgeting for a deficit, when we know that our dues are going to represent a deficit for the 3-year term that we were transitioning to the new dues structure, it was sort of the way we've always done budgeting, at least when I inherited it. So I think getting cleaner about how this represents itself in a way that is intuitive, I would be very interested in doing. So, and even if that's us then just asking our questions differently, Carrie, to the auditor.
Maybe we could schedule a call amongst the people who like accounting.
Yeah, why don't we?
Who are those people?
Can I have the names of those people?
Yeah,
Okay, well, Jim Salzgiver, I'm one.
Okay.
Jim, Lori, Lucas,
Yeah, it's been
Kim.
a while, but I still.
Yeah, so maybe we can see if we couldn't set up a time.
Yep.
And we can, Nicole and Carrie and I will talk and see if it makes sense that our auditor joins us for that conversation.
We need to-
But we have to pay
We
for
have to
that.
pay
So
her for
let's
that.
think
That's
about whether
pretty
or not.
Let's think about not paying.
Yeah.
I know, but I also don't, yes. So maybe we have a preliminary conversation to bring in our finite list of questions, send those off to her,
Yes,
and
we
if
can do that.
necessary, the follow-up conversation includes her.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Marty again. Do we have audited financial statements from
Yes.
2017?
Yes, we
We have them
do.
every year.
Okay, is there any way I could have that emailed to me? Not now, at some point.
Do we have those electronically? We get them in the book.
I don't have, I can scan them and send them tomorrow or something if you want.
Actually, if you could send those to me too, that'd be helpful.
That'd be-
Jim Salzgiver.
Thank you.
You can skip me.
So I think they came out at the annual meeting.
This is like, I'm not doing
Yeah, we have them at the annual meeting each year.
We did not have them this year.
We had
We had the draft.
We did not have the book
Right.
by the time of the end.
No, I had a draft. I had 4 copies of the draft.
We did have a draft.
So we could get that information
Yeah.
together and get it to those people, so I'm not hearing anything wrong, it's just that there's some difference
How it's
in
represented.
definitions that
And
needs
again,
to be
I think-
sorted out to make it more coherent.
This actually, I think, is good timing as well, because as we think about upcoming requests of the full membership, I think we'd like to look at aligning our year to a fiscal year that makes sense. And so timing-wise, I think that would come up this fall. I think getting our books clean so that people can understand them when they look at them, not because there's anything wrong with them, just because they might be represented in a way that's unfamiliar. Knowing what would seem more familiar to people who look at this
Yeah,
is helpful.
I'm, almost certain it's gonna be just presentation, so.
Yeah, no, I'm certain it is, and I'm thinking there's an answer that is just not obvious, because this is the way we've always done it, and so, but it's not necessarily a way that people who look at budgets, even on school boards or in their own businesses or otherwise, look
And
at
I've
these things.
been here through 3 different auditors.
But
Yeah.
not-for-profit
No one
accounting is
says-
different than
Yep.
standard accounting in any case, but,
Thank-
yeah,
I would
we'll get there.
just, given how quick and easy it was to spin up some people for this, I want those same people to know that strategic planning is a lot like accounting. 'Cause it was really easy to get a team together.
Well, I was gonna put out there that you same folks can join us for the financial committee this summer.
We will keep all this in mind, but with that, we have the financial report.
Thank you.
Normally, let's see, this is
I don't
the
even know if we
first
accept
quarter.
it.
We get the quarterly reports, but do we vote to accept them on a quarterly basis?
No.
This is just for your information.
Yeah.
Therefore, we need to get moving on the consent agenda because we have 4 minutes left tonight, folks. So, the consent agenda is the December minutes. What's the pleasure of the board?
Approve.
Someone move the adoption?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Neil moves to present the.
Second.
Second by Glassman.
5 seconds.
Whatever.
That's a second, but that's fine. Any further, any discussion? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's carried, so declare it. On a consent agenda, new business for tonight. Under this new business, we normally would be asking about things that need to be on the agenda next month that board members want. We have the smoking request, tobacco request, that will be on the agenda automatically, and we have Dan's Acts 46 motion that are carried over for this month. Those two things will be there at the minimum. Does anyone else have anything else they would like?
The committees.
Pressing, think what?
The committees.
The committees for next time being volunteered, that'll be there. Okay, anything else?
Do you have an interest in hearing me reissuing an invitation to the Senate Ed Committee
Yes.
Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Tell him he's just
they're
getting down
available,
on us,
we'd
so.
like to
We're not going to take no for an answer.
talk to them, all right? Anything else? If not, who would like to make the motion?
So moved.
Who is that? I'm sorry, I can't see.
Right. Is there a second to it? Second by Floor. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.